If you feel stuck in your life, if no matter how hard you try, situations seem to repeat, challenges keep recycling, cycles never seem to break, here's a truth that maybe no one has ever told you this clearly before. You are not stuck in life. You are stuck in the same internal angle from which you observe that life. And until that changes, nothing changes. Life doesn't respond to your wishes. It doesn't answer your requests, nor even your random thoughts. Life responds to you silently through the frequency from which you observe everything. That's what shapes your experience, your relationships, your results, and even the situations that seem to chase you. If you observe from fear, you live a reality that confirms that fear. If you observe from lack, the entire world rearranges itself to mirror that lack right back to you. But here's the key. When you change the way you see, you change everything. What once looked like a blockage dissolves. What seemed impossible starts to flow, because the outer world has no existence of its own. It is, in fact, a precise extension of the internal point from which you are looking. What you're about to understand here could be the turning point of your life, because nothing out there changes until the one who observes changes. And when the observer shifts, the entire world shifts in response. Get ready, because after today, you will never see your life the same way again. The root of all problems. There is something that operates silently in every person's life, and because it goes unnoticed, it ends up being responsible for most of the challenges, blockages, and repeating patterns they experience. And this something is not out there. It's not in circumstances, not in people, not in external events. It's hidden in the invisible point from where each person observes their own life. The problem has never really been what happens. The problem is the internal filter through which you perceive, interpret, and observe what happens. And that filter, which most of the time runs on autopilot, holds far more power than any external effort you might make to change your life. What almost no one realizes is that every thought, every emotion, every judgment is tied to this internal point of observation. And it's not neutral, it's vibrational. When you look at your reality through the lens of lack, you're not just interpreting the world, you're activating a frequency in the field, which immediately starts sending you experiences that match that perception. Look at this honestly. How many times in your life have you tried to change something, did everything you could, sought solutions, strategies, made every effort, yet somehow, mysteriously, everything seemed to pull you back to the same place? This doesn't happen because the universe is punishing you. It's not because you don't deserve it. It happens because even though your actions changed, the internal place from which you were observing did not. This is where the root of all problems lies. Life doesn't make mistakes. Life reflects. The quantum field doesn't judge, doesn't have opinions, doesn't play favorites. It doesn't give you what you want. It doesn't give you what you think you deserve. It gives you exactly what you sustain in your silent observation. As long as you look at life from lack, from resistance, from control, from fear, or from victimhood, the field has no choice. It reorganizes everything, absolutely everything, to reflect exactly that. People begin to act as mirrors of that vibration. Situations start unfolding in ways that validate what you're holding internally. And that's how cycles repeat. Not because the world is hard, but because the point from which you are observing it remains stuck in the same angle. Notice the subtlety here. Right now, you might be looking at your reality, believing it's hard, unfair, heavy, or challenging. But is it really? Or is it simply reflecting with mathematical precision the vibrational field of the observer you've become? And here comes one of the greatest traps of the mind. Believing that the problem is in what you see. That the problem is the situation, the people, the crisis, the relationship, the money, the health. But in truth, all of that is nothing more than a holographic projection of your internal vibrational state. The problem was never external. It has always been the invisible point from where you observe. It's like wearing glasses with colored lenses. If the lens is blue, everything you look at seems blue. It doesn't matter how much you fight against the blue. It doesn't matter how badly you wish the world were yellow, green, or red. Until you take off those lenses, everything remains blue. And here's the most surprising detail. Most people don't even know they're wearing those lenses. They sincerely believe they are seeing reality as it is. But they are not. They are seeing reality filtered through the vibrational field of the observer they have become. Life doesn't fail. Life doesn't make mistakes. Life simply mirrors back. It mirrors exactly what you sustain as an observer. And until the observer changes, the observed cannot change. That's why moving to another city, changing jobs, switching relationships, altering strategies, without changing the point of observation, is like swapping pieces in a game, but still playing by the same internal rules. The scene changes, but the script repeats. And this is where the key to true transformation begins. Because if the observer is the one sustaining the field, then the observer holds the power to change everything. But this doesn't happen through wishing, or through shallow willpower, or through external control. This happens the moment you realize that the root of everything was never out there. It was always in the invisible point from which you see. And when that shifts, everything shifts. The illusion. You think you're seeing reality, but you're seeing your frequency. There is an illusion, so well built, so subtle, that most people live an entire lifetime without even suspecting it exists. And this illusion is simply believing that we are seeing reality as it is. We automatically assume that what we perceive, what our eyes see, what our ears hear, what our senses pick up, is reality. But here's the revelation that starts changing absolutely everything. No one sees reality as it is. Everyone sees reality as they are. The world you see is not the world. It is the exact reflection of the frequency you silently sustain. Your inner vibration, your dominant energy, your mental and emotional state, all of this acts as filters that shape, distort, and frame what you call reality. In practice, you don't see what is. You see what you vibrate. It's shocking. It's unsettling. And at the same time, it's profoundly liberating, because it means that the problem that seems so solid, so real, so concrete, is nothing more than a mirror that is absolutely perfect and precise, reflecting not what the world is, but the internal point from which you observe that world. Maybe you've experienced this without realizing it. Two people facing exactly the same situation. One collapses emotionally, feels suffocated, desperate, hopeless. The other goes through the same scenario with the same external challenges, but remains calm, centered, clear, and even finds solutions where the first saw only problems. How is that possible if the world outside was exactly the same? The answer is here, clear and undeniable. What changes is not what happens. What changes is who is observing what happens. When you look at life through the lens of fear, everything looks like a threat. When you look through the lens of scarcity, everything feels insufficient. When your point of observation is victimhood, the whole world becomes oppressive, unfair, heavy. But when you shift your observation to a higher point, more conscious, more neutral, more loving, that same world, which once seemed like a battlefield, begins to transform into a field of possibilities. This is where many get confused. They believe the problem is the situation, and so they try to fix things out there, but they don't realize the problem is not in the scenario, it's in the frequency of the observer. And as long as this goes unseen, suffering continues, cycles repeat, and life keeps pushing them back to the same place. The most fascinating thing is that quantum physics already points to this. The observer is not separate from the observed phenomenon. The act of observing directly influences how reality behaves. This isn't mysticism, it's science. The electron behaves differently depending on whether or not it's being observed. In the same way, your life behaves differently depending on who is observing. If the observer is fear, reality collapses into scenarios of threat. If the observer is trust, love, and presence, reality collapses into flows of possibility. And maybe now, you're beginning to realize something that might feel uncomfortable, but also deeply liberating. You were never fighting against reality. You were always fighting against your own frequency. What you call a problem is merely a reflection of the internal state you are sustaining. Life is like a grand holographic mirror, showing you with absolute precision, not what you want, but what you are vibrationally. That's why repeating the same complaints, looking for someone to blame, trying to change the world out there, is like trying to change the reflection in a mirror without changing who's standing in front of it. The reflection only changes when the one who is looking changes. This is the great illusion humanity lives in, believing it's looking at the world, when in fact, it's looking at its own vibrational field, projected onto the world. And when you truly understand this, there's no more space to feel like a victim of life, because you start to realize that if the observer is the one defining reality, then the observer holds the power to transform absolutely everything. And that's the moment when the game starts to change. Because when you stop questioning the world and start questioning the point from which you look at the world, something extraordinary begins to happen. You realize you don't need to fix the scene. You don't need to fight the external. You just need to change the observer. Because when the observer changes, everything observed changes too. The awakening point. When you realize it was always you, there is a moment so subtle, yet so powerful, that it holds the potential to completely redefine everything you understand as life, reality, and existence. This moment doesn't happen in the outer world. It doesn't happen when circumstances change, when problems are solved, or when what you've longed for finally arrives. This moment happens within. It's the instant when you realize beyond any doubt, it was never about the world. It was always about you. This is where something breaks, something deep, structural, invisible, but something that had been holding up the illusion that you were a prisoner of circumstances. You realized the problem was never in life, never in the situation, never in people, never in what happened to you. The problem was always in the internal place from which you were observing it all. It's as if suddenly a curtain falls, and what once seemed so solid, so real, so impossible to overcome, starts to lose its power. It starts to dissolve. You look and you see what I used to call a problem was actually the exact reflection of the frequency I was sustaining. The world wasn't against me. The world was simply showing me who I was being. And right there, a massive realization hits. You finally see that the cycle of pain, of scarcity, of repetition and limitation wasn't happening to you. It was happening through you. It was your own unconscious vibration, your own internal angle of observation that was organizing the events, the situations, the meetings, and even the misalignments you were experiencing. And the most surprising part is realizing that for so long, you were fighting the wrong battle. You were fighting against situations, against challenges, against people, against the world. Without realizing, you were really just trying to change the reflection without ever looking at the one standing in front of the mirror. This awakening point isn't something anyone can give you. It doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from a technique, a book, or a magical promise. It happens in a moment of deep clarity when you finally see yourself. You recognize your own role within the quantum game of reality, and you understand the game was never against you. The game was always you, with yourself. And suddenly, what felt heavy loses its weight. What seemed hard dissolves. Not because the world changed, but because the one looking at that world changed. When the observer shifts, the relationship with everything changes. And as a result, everything changes. That relationship that once seemed impossible to heal suddenly starts transforming, or simply dissolves if it's no longer aligned with your new field. That financial problem that felt like a massive wall starts to reorganize itself, because it was never really a financial problem. It was always a reflection of the scarcity frequency active within the observer. The same applies to health, opportunities, prosperity, love, peace. Everything, absolutely everything, was silently responding to the field of the observer you were being. And this is where one of life's greatest revelations arises. There is no fixed reality. There is no objective world separate from you. What exists is a quantum field, flexible, dynamic, sensitive, constantly responding in real time to the vibrational state of the observer. The world you see is not the world. It's the world your consciousness can access based on your state of being. If you observe from pain, the entire field reshapes itself to return pain to you. If you observe from love, everything starts to reorganize at the frequency of love. And this is not a theoretical, conceptual, or philosophical shift. It is a structural shift in the very fabric of reality itself. This is the breaking point with the old self, because from this moment forward, it no longer makes sense to blame, to play the victim, or to wait for something outside of you to change so that you can finally feel good. You realize it's you who changes first. Your field elevates first. Your point of observation shifts first. And the world simply responds. If this awareness resonates with you, if somehow this truth is vibrating inside you right now, then leave a like on this video. That way, I'll know this message found resonance in your field, and that together, we are tapping into this frequency of awakening. How to change your life from the inside out. Now that you're starting to understand more clearly than ever that life doesn't respond to what you want, nor to what you wish for, but rather to the vibrational state of the point from which you observe everything, a question inevitably echoes within. If everything depends on who's observing, then how do I change the observer I'm being? And this is where we step into one of the most powerful, liberating, and transformative movements a human being can consciously access: the internal shift of the point of observation. And no, this isn't theory. It isn't a concept. It's practice. It's real. It's energetic. And when you do it, the field responds. Life responds. Because it has no choice. It always reflects. The first step of this practice begins when you honestly acknowledge that something in your life feels uncomfortable, heavy, blocked, or simply isn't flowing. It could be a situation, a relationship, a financial struggle, constant anxiety, a paralyzing fear, or even that subtle feeling of stagnation that has no name, but quietly drains your energy. When you recognize this, a question arises that completely changes the game. From where inside of me am I looking at this? And this question isn't mental, it's vibrational. It invites you to step out of the external storyline and start noticing what internal field is sustaining this reflection. When you allow yourself to pause, breathe, and truly observe, you begin to identify the point from which you've been looking at that situation. And almost always, and that point is contaminated by some unconscious frequency: fear, control, resistance, judgment, victimhood, scarcity, or insecurity. Seeing this is not a reason for guilt or self-criticism. Quite the opposite. It's an act of clarity. Because the moment you see You are no longer fully a prisoner. The very act of observing from consciousness immediately begins to weaken that dense field that had been running on autopilot. And this is exactly where the shift happens, because you start consciously to choose to look at that situation from a different internal place. You can then breathe deeply, connect with your presence, and make a vibrational choice. What if, instead of looking at this from fear, I chose to look at it from awareness? Feel what shifts the moment you make this internal movement. The body immediately starts to relax. The frequency rises. Your perception expands. What once seemed like a problem starts to dissolve, not because the external instantly changed, but because the one looking changed. And when the observer changes, the quantum field immediately starts to reorganize in alignment with this new vibrational state. Perhaps in this very moment, you start to feel clarity arriving, a lightness emerging, or even that thought that just minutes ago was stuck now begins to open, revealing solutions that didn't exist before. This happens because life does not respond to the conditioned mind. Life responds to the present consciousness. And when you step into the place of presence, the field realizes it no longer needs to sustain the reflection of those old frequencies. The most beautiful part of this process is that it doesn't require you to solve the problem externally. It doesn't ask you to understand everything or to fix the world. It simply invites you to step out of the role of someone trapped in the reflection and into the role of the one who observes from a new angle, with a new vibration, with a new consciousness. And right here, something almost magical happens. Though truthfully, it's not magic. It's pure consciousness physics. The field, silently, begins to dissolve everything that is no longer aligned with this new observer. Doors that once seemed locked start to open. Heavy situations begin to lose their weight. What was stuck gradually starts moving. Because life doesn't change when you fix everything out there. Life changes when the observer sustaining that reality changes. And this is the real path to transformation from the inside out. This practice isn't something you do once and you're done. It becomes a way of living, a way of being in the world. From now on, every discomfort, every tightness, every challenging situation becomes an invitation to ask once more, from where am I looking at this? And in that moment, you choose consciously to shift your point of observation. And when this becomes your new way of living, get ready, because the world you're about to experience will no longer be the same. The quantum unfolding. When the observer changes, the entire world responds. The universe doesn't wait for you to change in order to start reorganizing itself. It senses instantly when your vibrational field rises. It's as if a silent update happens the very moment you shift your internal point of observation. And from that point on, everything begins to respond. Not because you asked, not because you forced it, but simply because it cannot be any other way. The quantum field is pure resonance. It doesn't question, it doesn't analyze, it doesn't deliberate. It simply reflects exactly what you are being. And in the very instant your vibration shifts, your reality inevitably begins to fold, to reorganize, to reshape itself to mirror this new state of being. It doesn't matter how long you've been stuck in patterns, in repetitions, in blockages, or in situations that seemed unsolvable. When the observer changes, the game changes, because the field doesn't respond to external attempts, exhausting efforts, or desperate control. The field responds to your silent vibrational state, to your internal alignment, to the perception you hold while observing life. And it's truly impressive how reality reorganizes itself with almost surgical precision. What no longer resonates simply starts to dissolve. Situations end. Relationships fall away. Dynamics that once seemed immovable begin to lose strength. At the same time, doors that once seemed locked swing open. Paths that were invisible reveal themselves, and opportunities start emerging, often from places you never imagined. The conditioned mind, so used to fighting, controlling, and wearing itself out trying to fix the outer world, often doesn't understand this. It tries to rationalize, to create logic, to fit it into familiar models. But the truth is simple. It's not the world that changes so you can change. It's you who changes, and the world responds. Always. Quantum unfolding isn't some spiritual promise, nor an abstract idea. It's the very architecture of reality in motion. Quantum physics has already shown the observer is not separate from what is being observed. The act of observing collapses possibilities, defines forms, and shapes manifestation. When you observe from fear, you collapse realities of fear. When you observe from consciousness, you collapse flows of expansion, healing, and infinite possibilities. What you once called bad luck, failure, or problems was never really that. It was always the field responding perfectly to the observer you were being. And the very moment that observer shifts, the entire reality begins to reorganize. There is no delay. There is no negotiation. There are no exceptions. The field responds, and it responds now. The universe doesn't move based on your spoken desires, your conscious will, or your random thoughts. It moves by the vibration of the one who observes. And this, perhaps, is one of the greatest keys a human being can ever access. Because when the observer changes, there is no other option. The entire world changes too. How not to fall back into the old angle. The continuous practice of the new observer. True transformation doesn't happen at the moment you realize a deep truth. It begins there, but it becomes solid through daily practice, through an internal commitment to remain in the new angle, the new point of observation, even when the old reality subtly tries to pull you back into its familiar patterns. Because the old will try to call you back, not out of malice, not because the universe is testing you, but simply because your previous vibration was so familiar, so crystallized in your field, that it creates inertia. And if you're not paying attention, it's easy, almost automatic, to slip back into the old angle, to fall back into seeing life through the lens of fear, scarcity, resistance, hurry, control, comparison, or judgment. The external world often acts as a reminder of your old frequencies, because what was sustained for a long time doesn't just vanish overnight. It does begin to lose power. It begins to dissolve. But it's precisely during this dissolution process that many get confused. When they still see the old reflections appearing, the tendency is to believe that change isn't happening, that it's not working. And in that exact thought, many unconsciously disconnect from the new angle and slip right back into the old observer. This is why understanding this is crucial. Reality functions like a holographic mirror, and it has a slight delay. When you shift internally, the field begins to reorganize immediately, but the reflections of the old field may still show up for a little while. Not because they are stronger, but because they are simply residues, vibrational echoes of who you used to be. And here's the key. Do not be fooled by the old reflections. They are no longer you. They are just remnants of the previous field. And if you stand firm in the new angle, in the new vibrational state, something magical and completely predictable within quantum laws begins to happen. The old dissolves and the new stabilizes. That's why, more than a one-time practice, this becomes a continuous state of presence, a loving commitment to yourself, a vibrational choice renewed each morning, each moment, with every situation life presents to you. The old field whispers, look at the problem, fight, control, suffer, fear. But now, You hold a key that cannot be forgotten. You know, it was never about the problem. It never was. It's about who is looking at it. And right now, in this exact instant, you can choose consciously to breathe, to align, and to ask yourself, who's observing right now? Is it my conditioned, programmed, automatic self, or my conscious, present, creative self? Every discomfort, every challenge, every tightness is no longer a problem. It is a reminder, an invitation, a living opportunity to choose again, to shift again, to that internal point where you observe everything, not from the conditioned mind, but from consciousness. And the more you choose this, the more natural it becomes, because the frequency of the new starts stabilizing in your field. What once required effort begins to become your new nature. And at that point, something extraordinary happens. The new becomes so stable, so natural, that the old completely loses its ability to pull you back. The continuous practice of the new observer isn't a mental exercise. It's a vibrational choice, a choice made with presence, with awareness, and with self-love. And the more you choose it, the more the field understands that there is no longer a need to reflect the old, because the old simply finds no one left to sustain it. And when this installs itself within you, there is no going back. Life ceases to be a cycle of repetition, of struggle, of resistance, and transforms into a flow of conscious creation. Because now, you are no longer living on the autopilot of the old observer. You are living in the freedom of the new, and the universe, as always, simply responds. We've arrived at the end of our journey, and if there's one thing that has become absolutely clear, it's that life doesn't change when things change. Life changes when the one observing those things changes. The world number was never about what happens. It was always about who you are being in the world, because everything, absolutely everything, starts from the internal point from which you observe. When the gaze shifts, the reflection shifts. When the observer changes, the entire world changes. And this is why, from now on, you carry a key that no one can ever take from you. The awareness that it is your vibrational state that defines your reality. If this journey resonated with you, let me know in the comments by writing, "I choose to be the new observer." That way, I'll know you made it this far, present, grounded, and that we are together, sharing the same frequency of transformation.